Extroverted people will ask questions. They'll ask all kinds of questions. They're not ashamed to ask a question. But introverted people tend to not to be a little reluctant about asking questions. The reality is people who are really into spiritual things and into inner reflection and thinking about this type of stuff, generally, not always, tend to be introverts. So questions, sometimes people say, I don't ask a question. Or I can't think of anything to say. Or I got too much to ask. That was a stupid question. For one thing, I'll tell you, as I told my students as a teacher, no question is stupid. No question is ridiculous. None, especially with spiritual matters. And one thing about this movement, this Krishna consciousness movement, is that we devotees are encouraged to ask questions. We're thinking path. We're not just blind thinkers. Sometimes we are told something, we go, wait a minute, that doesn't sound quite right to me. What's going on here? That's okay, you need to ask. So I want to encourage you to ask, but to help you, to encourage you to ask a question, we're going to do this, nobody's going to know who asked the question, because I brought some little tools with me to do that. So we've got a little box. And you can go, ooh, ah, as I open up, if I do this. Ooh. Sparkly. Okay, so this will be the box where the questions are. Here we go again. Ooh, paper. Yes, we're doing this old school. Paper and pen. Oh my goodness. So we're going to do old school for the questions. Welcome. So this Q&A, I'm going to have you, like I said, go ahead and ask questions. Now, another little surprise I have in here. So that, you can't just think the question on the paper. That ain't going to work. So I got pens. Old school again. Yes, old school again. Yes, I got pens. So, and we'll see how many pens we'll need. I got a bunch of them. Anyway, so you might have to scribble. You know how the pens are when you get pens? You're trying to get them to write and the ink doesn't come. So you got to scribble. Anyway, because they're brand new. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the box up here. And you can put your paper in there. We're going to pass paper and pens. You want to pass it around, please? Make sure everybody gets kind of spread around a little bit. Probably need 2 pads, but you might need more pens than that, but we'll see. We can pass pens too. If you need more pens, need more paper, let's do it that way. Okay. So while we're doing that, I'm thinking of something to ask. Okay. And let's say that the criteria of the question is, of course, come on, let's deal with Krishna consciousness, okay? People can ask you anything. I don't mean that, but related to our topic of Krishna consciousness. So to get this going, how many people, first of all, I know some of you are devotees, okay, but how many people are brand new to this, to this, or know something, a little something about it, Krishna consciousness? Okay, all right, good. How many people know quite a bit about Krishna consciousness or understand it or been in one of our lectures before? Raise your hand. I know I have. Yeah. All right. So in lieu of that, just whatever you want to ask, gearing towards Krishna consciousness or towards spirituality itself. If you're new and you don't know anything about Krishna consciousness, then some question you have about God, about the divine, about who we are, what we are, all that kind of good stuff, okay? So to start this off, on my radio show, I had what we call 9 essential questions, and I asked devotees about that. I had a lecture about that. I thought about doing that. I thought, I've done that already. So basically, I will start it off with some basic questions to get you kind of motivated about this. So one of the things that we wonder about is that in Krishna consciousness, of course, you were told about chanting the holy name, and we just had an example of doing that. That is the foundation and the essence of our movement, is chanting the holy name. Now, what does that mean to chant the holy name? What exactly does that mean? That means, how many people meditate? In some form. Okay. Okay, so meditation is kind of like mindfulness. It's like thinking about a thought or whatever. Some people do that. Or for us, we chant a mantra. And that's in what we just displayed here in Kirtan, the Maha Mantra, the great mantra. And we chant that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And that name is an incarnation of God, Krishna, in a sound vibration. So when you chant that name, you are directly having a relationship with God, with Krishna, right there in front of you. That's our belief, and that's what we go for. That's the reason the chanting the holy name is so important to us. Plus, Lord Chaitanya, who started this movement, the Sankirtan movement, brought the holy name out, especially the Maha Mantra, which was very secretive at the time. Yes?
Also, the female aspect of God, Srimati Radharani, is represented in the Maha Mantra also.
Absolutely.
Especially Hare, where it says Hare.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all those aspects of God. Yeah. So it's real important to understand that aspect of our teaching. But what is it that we basically believe? What's the philosophy? Well, the philosophy can be very intricate or very simple. To put it simply, our philosophy is pretty simple. You are not this body. That's right. You're not this body at all. So if you're not this body itself, then what are you? You are a spiritual being, or as Prabhupada said, a spirit soul. And that is eternal. That lasts forever. So when this body dies, inevitably it will. I mean, we're all going to make that journey. Then when we do, the body's the only part of us that dies. We continue on. Now, depending on karma and depending on situations, we may take on another body. Or if we're a devotee and we're chanting the holy name or doing the proper things, we may go back home to God. Now, if we last forever, eternally, then what in the world are we supposed to be doing? Right? What's our purpose? What's our reason for existing? Our reason for existing is that we are loving, devoted servants to God. That's why we exist. To serve. And I know in our world, to serve is sometimes not looked at. And, it's looked at kind of negatively. In other words, we want to lead. We want to be the boss, right? But in reality, eternally, we are really not that. And it's not like that. Only the material world doesn't get twisted up like that. So we serve because that's our nature to serve. That's our nature to love. And we love the divine, the beloved, God, Krishna. So that's our reason for existence. So that's part of the answer to that question about basically what is our philosophy? What do we believe in? Okay. So anybody got questions yet? Put in the box yet? Oh, pen? Okay. You can pass my pen. Does anybody got a spare pen there? You can pass around. All right. So let's see what else we can talk about as far as questions go. Let's see. What do you think? So devotees tend to be vegetarians. So why are devotees vegetarians? Why do we not eat meat? What's the deal with meat? What's the big deal? Raised in the United States, this country, we have barbecues. I know I was raised eating meat. My parents, every Saturday night, my dad would fix a steak. Fix good steak too. We put it on the grill, fix them. At that time, we didn't think anything about it. But early on in my life, in high school, I started, you know what? I don't want to eat meat no more. it doesn't feel right to me, and so I stopped doing it in high school. So why are we vegetarians? Well, it has a lot to do with a lot of things. First of all, it's one of our vows as devotees is we are to not eat meat. We don't eat onions either. We don't eat garlic. Some people are going, oh, gosh, nothing has any flavor without onions and garlic in it, right? But actually it does. Yeah, we can fix it good. But we don't eat those things. Onions and garlic, it's because it's what the scriptures say we don't eat. We don't eat that. There's other reasons why. It's not a good yogic diet to do that because it makes us too hot. It makes us too passionate, those type of things. So that's other side reasons why we don't eat onions and garlic. Vegetarian, though, we just don't eat animals. Animals are sacred. They're living entities, just like we are. So we don't eat them. In India, a good portion of that country is where this path comes from, is India, is vegetarian. Although there are parts of India that are not vegetarian. They eat chicken, fish, really rare they eat beef at all, no cow, but they do eat chicken and fish and no pork usually. But they do eat that sometimes in some areas. But primarily the country's vegetarian. It's a part of the religious and spiritual path. The next thing is that, let's see, what else?
You want us to just put them in the
Yeah, just put it in the box. No, it's. So the next thing is that you may see devotees around, for people who are new, see devotees with this mark on their head. And you're going, what? What's that all about? It's called tilak. It's a sacred symbol that we put on. And you'll find in India, different, not devotees of our movement, but different people in other movements will have different type of tilak on their head. Some of them get very, very colorful. Go to India and you see that all over the place. I know when I was in India, I was going, wow, it's really go all out, that area. But for us, this is what we wear, and it's and we put that on every day, and we also put on different parts of our body as well. So that's what that's all about. You also find that some devotees wear what Prabhu here is wearing, a dhoti. Dhoti, what's that all about? Dhoti is the dress of a devotee. It's a tradition within India, and so we adopted that. Prabhupada wore dhoti, a kurta, or things like that. So we do it too. It's part of the tradition. It's not necessary. I mean, it's not really. We don't have to, but we like to try to honor that type of dress. As women dress in these beautiful saris, there's some gorgeous saris, just beautiful out there. So women will dress in that as well. All right. Okay. So I think I went over the real basics. So let's see what you have so far. And keep thinking about questions. If you think about more and you need a pen or more paper, we'll go ahead and do it. Okay. Well, one thing I forgot to say is try to write legibly. I know that, when I was type on computers, and like my penmanship, forget it. It's hieroglyphics. But, let's see what we can do. Oh, wow, there's a elaborate one. Let's go for it. Should have brought my reading glasses. All right. Let's see what we got here. Oh, there are two questions. So what determines where your soul goes at death? And why? Really good question. So what determines where your soul goes at death and why? Well, your karma, your actions, what you do in this life, will determine that. Thank you, Prabhu. So that you get your pen stolen? So that will determine that. In a very simple answer to that question. It can get very complicated in the sense of what type of body you may take, and it can be simple too. I mean, basically, if you I'll use a kind of a little bit of a description that Prabhupada used to use it. If you act like a dog in your life, you'll probably come back as a dog. And that means in behavior and not being in your human form and being the highest that you can be in a human form. Or, you could just come back as another human if you do fairly good things. You're just a nice person, a good person. You try to be pious. You try to think of God. You try to do the best you can in your life and be good to people. You may come back as a human being. So your karma determines that. Good question. As I understand it, the why is that is the way Krishna set it up for us. That's the why. There's cause and effect in the world. In other words, if I jump into a pool of water, I am going to get wet. It's just that simple. There's no avoiding that. Unless I wear a wetsuit or something, I guess, something like that. But you're going to get wet. If I stick my hand in a fire, you're going to get burned. Cause and effect. Works like that. That's science, basically, too. So that's a simple answer to that question. Very simple. We can get very intricate with that question, but it's simple. That's the basic answer. Any devotees want to add anything to that?
It also depends on, while you're in the world as a devotee, what you focus on in your spiritual practice. For example, if you're always thinking about Lord Ramachandra and you're very inspired by his pastimes, and once you reach perfection, you will be in his pastimes. You're thinking about Radha and Krishna, and once you reach perfection, you'll be in their pastimes.
That's very true. Yeah, the point of death is real important. We're all going to make that journey. Time when we're going to be leaving our body and our body's going to go away. What we're thinking about at that particular time also will have a lot to do with our next life, where we're going to go to as well. That's the reason in Krishna consciousness for devotees, we want to be chanting the holy name and thinking of Krishna when that happens. Or if we can't, for some reason we're real sick, and all drugged up or whatever, then we can have devotees help us with that too. So that's important. All right. Next. Let's see. Krishna consciousness is a non-sectarian movement. But we also see Lord Chaitanya say Mahamantra is the only way to be liberated from birth and death. What is the difference between Mahamantra and the other paths to enlightenment? Very good. When I was, I'm gonna go back a little bit for history here for myself. When I was a little kid, I always thought about spiritual stuff. My parents were not churchgoers, but we had primarily, although a few books in the house, we had primarily two books. Really weird. We had one word, had a Bible. That was the King James Version of the Bible, New and Old Testament. Although they hardly ever opened it. We had a really good old Webster's dictionary. It was really, really cool. You can find any word in that dictionary. And next to all of that was an old book on Hatha Yoga. I kid you not. And I never saw my parents ever practice Hatha Yoga. So it was weird. And I remember those books on our shelf as the only books on our shelf outside of the Better Homes and Garden Cookbook. The really good one, with all the, maybe some of you don't remember that, but it had a really cool cookbook. It was very thorough. But that was it. And I used to look at the Hatha Yoga book quite a bit, and I would ask questions about the Bible, And my dad was raised a Catholic. He was a little more knowledgeable, I guess, because he was so embedded and went to Catholic school and all that. So I'd ask him questions if I had questions about God, about Jesus or whatever. So I was always on a spiritual path. And through that interest that drove me along with the Beatles and, their trips to India, the Maharishi and Srila Prabhupada, because George Harrison was into that. Through all of that, I dabbled in a lot of different faiths because I was in a search. I was a seeker and I searched. I dabbled in all forms of the Sanatana Dharma, as far as what's called, commonly in academic circles as Hinduism. I dabbled in Buddhism, Sufism, Christianity, mysticism, paganism. I mean, the whole gamut. Whatever was around at the time, that talked about God and deity or whatever, I was into it. And for a while, I was a practicing Buddhist. And one of the things that I discovered within all the faiths that I practiced was is the unity and the unification and the similarity of our paths more than the differences. There are differences, significant ones, just in practice and approach and so forth and so on. But are there different roads to enlightenment? Enlightenment is another word altogether too. Enlightenment, I think, what the question is they're meaning like, liberation or nirvana or the completeness of whatever we're supposed to be doing. Or awareness, of all these things. So all the different paths lead to it in some form or another. So when religions say that their way is the only way, it gets a little weird that way for me. It always has, because of my history, because I understand those type of histories. Buddhism, for instance, a lot of people think the Buddhists are atheists. The interesting thing about that, Lord Buddha never said there was no God. He just never talked about God. But in our line, Lord Buddha is an incarnation of Krishna. So he just emphasized suffering, is what he emphasized. And in a way, in our own teachings, we talk about that too, but in a different way. So similarities, but different ways of presenting it. Christianity, for instance, which in the West here we're very familiar with, because a lot of us are raised in Christian households or know about it for sure, something about it. There's a great television series that my god sister and god brother here turned me on to, The Chosen. I've never seen that, but it is amazing. It talks about the life of Jesus and does it such a respectful and very, very well done way. And you see when they're talking and you read the Bible and things like that, the New Testament especially, you see the similarities that are there. So everything has a similarity to different paths. So it doesn't really, enlightenment other paths can get you there. For us, the belief that because it's the age that we live in, different ages that we live in have different means to become, for lack of a better word, enlightened. In our scriptures, there's 4 different ages that exist. In this age that we're in now is called Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga. Yuga means age. And this age is an age of chaos, an age of unrest, an age of argument, an age of conflict. And you can see that in the world all around you, our political situation, our war, everything. You can see it just escalating here and there all the time. And also in this age that it is believed that we are not very intelligent. We can think and we can do certain things, but real intricate philosophies and things like that is very difficult for us to grasp hold of. So the Maha Mantra and practicing that is what we emphasize because anybody can do that. It's a simple practice. And Lord Chaitanya gave us that, brought it out in the open, because it was kind of a hidden thing, the Maha Mantra was, especially in the Maha Mantra. To remember God, to always be thinking of God, and be Krishna conscious, God conscious all the time. I was in the Middle East when I was in the in the military. I was in the Air Force for a while. I was in the Middle East. And I remember in Saudi Arabia for about 3 months. And it was amazing. The Muslims would, 5 times a day, man, they're praying. They don't care what they're doing. Boom, it's dropped. And they're praying and doing their prostrations. And at that time, I looked at that, I thought, wow, that's amazing faith. Just to be dedicated to do that every single day. So again, all religions have their own way of doing it, remembering God. But for us, it's in the form of the Maha Mantra, chanting. So that's why we do that. And that's why, so the difference between these things, there's differences, but the goal is fairly similar in similar ways. But we do have that type of level of respect for different faiths. And Prabhupada also said that we, everybody can chant the Maha Mantra. He was very open to the understanding of Christ and his teachings and other ways of teaching. So anybody can do that. And different type of religions do have different forms of holy names too. You got the Jesus prayer in Christianity. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. So if you're remembering God, that's the important thing that you're doing. And so, and this is kind of my take more on it. That we like to try to emphasize our own path a little more, and it comes with comfortability. What you can attune to, what you feel it's important to you. To how you can connect. Remember this bhakti yoga in which we practice. Yoga means to connect. So connect to what? To connect to God. So if you have a way that right now at this time you can connect with God and believe in God and have a relationship with God, then that's the path for you right now. But for us, it's chanting the Maha Mantra. Yes.
I was just going to say, we use the term enlightenment kind of as a blanket term.
Yeah.
But but there's at least 3 different types of enlightenment.
Yep.
There's Brahman, or the effulgence of Krishna. Mm-hmm. There's Paramatma, and there's Bhagavan, the personal God, Krishna. So with Buddhism, for example, if they don't even have a concept of a personal God,
yeah,
whatever enlightenment they reach is not the same as what a devotee reaches.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, there are different forms of enlightenment. In fact, there's kind of an interesting story to that, because when I was practicing a certain form of Buddhism, I remember an Ajahn was talking about different levels of enlightenment that I was at a lecture to. And he openly admitted, he was a famous Ajahn actually, he openly admitted that Buddhists can only reach a certain stage of enlightenment in this age. It's impossible to go beyond that. I remember that distinctly, and talking about that. Yeah, that was really good, even from them.
Because one thing is that what the devotees, the goal of the devotees is actually the highest state of enlightenment.
Right.
The Bhagavan realization. Because the other two, the God in your heart, the Paramatma, and Krishna's effulgence,
right,
the Brahmajyoti, those are all coming from the person Bhagavan.
Yes.
So we're going for the highest state of enlightenment. Some other paths don't even know about the highest state of enlightenment.
Yeah, and it has a lot. It also has to do with the idea too, that I think that the way I understand it is that we try to have a very personal relationship with God. Some paths tend to oftentimes keep God at a distance a bit. It's just because the way I've studied them and dwelled into them is basically it has a lot to do with just their approach. There's a lot of, like in Middle Eastern religions, you have a love of God, of course. There's a lot of love. If you look at the Sufis and Rumi and his poems and stuff like that, there's all about the love of the beloved, love of the divine. But there's also a fear of God. And so oftentimes they keep God at a little bit of a distance, not exclusively, but generally speaking in those paths. Where in Krishna consciousness, we want a very close, intimately personal relationship with God. We don't know everything about God. So we turn to that face of God, which is Krishna, which is the supreme personality of Godhead. And we turn to that face. And we can have a very intimate, close relationship with God. And if that's the case, then we go to those higher states because of that reason in our practices and so forth and so on. Because you can have that more close personal relationship. So if you're ready for that, for you, definitely. Example, in fact, I just had a talk with a Christian about this very thing. One of the things that they were talking about was that the relationship with God in the Christian sense of the word is through Jesus Christ. So again, their guru, their avatar, is through him. Again, you can have that through through that type of source as well, and have a very close relationship as well. But again, that's very true. Thank you, Prabhu, for that, because that's very true. All right. Let's get to the next sheet here. That's the one sheet. Wow, that was a loaded one. That was good. All right. Significance of initiation? Question mark. So in our movement, and in many other movements too, you have forms of that, especially if you become clergy and other paths, you have initiation. And the significance of that is a lot of things. First and foremost, when you decide to dedicate yourself to any path, and they require an initiation process to do that, the initiation is a formalization on a material level, formalization of your vows, of your dedication to the path that you're following. And that's important. And so it helps to certify that within inside yourself and your heart. The initiation process can also be life-changing in many ways. For us, in our traditions, we have a very elaborate initiation ceremonies. We have a fire yajna, as they call it, fire ceremony. We say a lot of mantras. We have a guru that initiates us, that we accept, and it gives us our mala beads to chant on, gives us a name, because where you have a new name, it's a new birth that we decide to do. So we go into that, and we take vows. For us, our vows are no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxicants. We cannot smoke weed, we cannot take drugs, we can't drink, and anything like that, and no illicit sex. So that's what we take a vow of, and to chant the Maha Mantra. And for other paths, it's different, but they all kind of this similar type of idea that when you're initiated, you are taking on a new persona within yourself. And the significance psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and more importantly, spiritually, initiation is an extremely important part of this process. Now, I've heard some say that initiation is kind of a formalization. If you've already been chanting and you already do your things and you're practicing the vows and so forth and so on, it's more of a formalization of what you're already doing, if you're devout with it. But the initiation process is important because that fire ceremony that's done is a purification process too. They chant a lot of mantras and they do a lot of things to help purify you. And that means that, for a lack of a better word, you kind of start with a clean slate. Because we've all done past things in our lives, again, for lack of a better word, sins. And we basically need a clean slate to start with. And we have one after the initiation process. Now, for us, we have three different types. We have two different types of initiations. And then we have, we also can take on sannyas, which means totally renounced order of life. We can do that. We'll have different type of initiations, different levels of them. I remember one of my real offshoot religions, way out there, that I practiced one time was neo. And neo-paganism even has initiation processes that you go. Really interesting to see the different type of people and how they do that. It's fascinating. You know, when I was in college, I studied philosophy and religious studies. That's what I majored in. So it was interesting to kind of go through that. But initiation process is significant to a lot of paths, especially ours. Very significant. Anybody want to add anything to that? Yes, Prabhu. Go ahead. No.
I just wanted to add that, like, we also have a subtle body, and like by taking initiation, it puts like a samskar in there. So it puts like a giant impression into your being, which will carry on to your next life if you do take another birth. So then if it's like you're sure you want to go down like a spiritual path or like the path towards God, then if you like your next life take another birth, you'll have that impression in you. So you're not like molded in a way that you can continue your progress. Whereas if you didn't have that dramatic imprint into your being, it won't be as prominent of a thing in your next life. So
that's true. Does all that kind of stuff. Yes, Prabhu.
I was going to say, if the guru that you take initiation from is truly God realized guru, that person can help you tremendously.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, things that might take you 20 lifetimes, you can knock out in one day.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So being the stronger your faith is in your guru, the more progress and the quicker progress you can make.
That's very true. Yeah, it's very important. I believe we have to. All right. Yeah, it's good. Why Krishna consciousness? Why not Rama consciousness? Why not Nrsinga? Nrsinga is a lion-headed form of Krishna. Well, I mean, we do honor that. I mean, these are different aspects of God. I'm gonna quote a famous Indian saint, and sometimes he's not popular in our movement because he's not a part of our movement, but he did say something that was very significant back in the 20s. And 1920s, that's 2020s, 1920s. And a press person asked him one time, well, why does India have so many gods and, and deities? And he said that, well, that's really a misnomer. We don't really have all these deities and gods. There's only one God, but God has over 1,000 different faces. So, in that term, and for us, in our faith, that's a general belief that Rama, Krishna, are one and the same, different personalities of the same thing. So, in other words, that consciousness of God is the important thing. We focus on Krishna for the reasons we discussed earlier, that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And so that particular face of God, of Krishna, is what we turn to because we want to have a personal relationship with God. We could turn to Rama, nothing wrong with that. Rama is a part of that. Rama is even in the Mahamantra. In different forms. I mean, Sitaram, I'm thinking that somebody's probably referring to that. Is this, I mean, I remember I read one time that Rama and Balaram, well, it's the same thing, but different aspects of the same thing. So again, when you're God conscious, Krishna conscious, that's a particular aspect you're focusing on, which we like to put emphasis on. There's nothing wrong with Rama consciousness. But again, as we talk, that if we focus on Krishna, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we can have that very close personal relationship with deity. That's the best face to turn to have that. So we automatically go to that Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's like anything else. It's like, let's say that you fall in love with somebody, you want to know everything about them. You want to be able to please them. You want to be able to know what their likes or dislikes are and all that sort of thing. You want to do all that. So God, in the form of Krishna, can give us that, because we're turning to a face that he can give us his Supreme Personality. He'll give us all his likes, dislikes. We can get very, very close and intimate with God in that way, as we would somebody else that we were falling in love with. We can have that type of relationship, very close, intimate relationship with God. So that's a face we turn to. So there's nothing wrong with these other faces. In our path, it's just that, as we said earlier, that's the higher state that we try to look for. In that way, that relationship that we have with God is very important. You can answer that question. All right. So let's go to the next question. That one got there. Hello, Atul Kapinda. Hare Krishna, how are you doing? Nice to see you. What's kind of surprises faces tonight? That's really nice. Encouraging. Does the Krishna philosophy believe or destiny? Oh, okay. Person says, I'm afraid I think they're saying they're afraid to deviate from the path I'm going against Krishna. So there's a couple of questions in this, so we'll start with the first one. Does the Krishna philosophy believe in a certain life path and destiny? Well, destiny and life path is different things. But a life path, yes. It does believe in a certain life path. We follow, like I said, we follow these vows. We chant the holy names. So it's definitely a life path change in what we're doing. And once we change that path, does our destiny change? Or is destiny already pre-written? What do you think? Think destiny's already planned out? Or do we?
Kind of both.
Kind of, right.
Astrological chart, but then you also have your limited free will influences what might happen.
Exactly. So it's kind of happening both. So but definitely it changes your life path. And anything that you do can change your life path. I used to see kids at college. I know that Krishna Jivani can relate to that, but you see students going to Pima College all the time. And of course, they take certain majors and they're getting educated in certain ways. Will change their life path. It changes a lot of things they do. Sometimes they'll change their major. Middle of, I've seen students do that. They start off as maybe, whatever they start off at. One guy started off as an artist that I knew. I remember this guy Stinkley. He started as a fine artist. And he says, I'm not going to be able to do anything with that. I'm not going to make no money with that. So what do you do? He changes major to business. Dude, it's like a 180. But, it happens.
Maybe he sells art for a living.
Maybe he might want to sell art for a living. Who knows? But you can maybe mix the two somehow. But yeah, definitely when you take on any sort of spiritual, you decide a spiritual path and you're changing your life with it. And destiny, as we talked about, can be changed as well with that. As far as the other part of the question, that I believe what they mean is that if they deviate from that path, are they going to get against Krishna? That is a good question. That really is a good question. We're not perfect. We're in this age of Kali Yuga. We do the best we can. in what we do. The one thing as devotees in the path, we should always be towards each other is compassionate. Because, you know, I've seen in all faiths, I've seen people who are, you know, pointing their fingers at other people. Oh, you're not doing this. You're chanting your rounds wrong, or you're doing that. You know, you're doing this wrong, or doing that wrong. And I have actually told devotees when they're really picky like that. I've gone to them. I says, you know, I appreciate you saying things like that, but sometimes it doesn't help. You know, I always, if I have a tendency to want to do that, I look in a mirror. I got a lot of things to judge there. So, I mean, the simple fact is this, is that we're going to make all kinds of mistakes. If we deviate from our path, we, in other words, fall, okay, from our path that we take. Let's say we use Krishna consciousness as an example. Then we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and do it all again without making the same mistake. Don't be too hard on yourself, you know, and just be easy on yourself. You know, do it. I mean, I've certainly done that myself. You know, there's things I've done wrong and things I wish I had done differently and have regrets for or whatever. But you know, I can just eat you up. So you just, if you fall away, that's you're going to do it. You know, it's going to happen, and you just do the best you can to get back on path, whatever you're doing. And having the association of devotees and association of the people that are on a similar path can really help you. And to have a few people that you can talk to and can relate to, and when this happens and they can support you, is extremely important. Your guru, in other words, can do that too. Your Shishka gurus, your teaching gurus, and your initiating gurus, they can help you, and other devotees. You know, you can certainly do that. So don't kick yourself too much about it, but try not to make the same mistake again. You know, learn from the mistake, learn from falling. Well, why did you fall? What happened? Give it a chance to analyze that and say, okay, what's that about? What did I learn from that problem, that experience? So very important. So don't be too critical of yourself about that. It's going to happen. Okay, how does the Krishna philosophy of rebirth differ from that of Buddhist philosophy? I kind of touched a little bit on that earlier, a little bit. Well, I mean, the Buddha never talked about God, you know, so rebirth in the sense of the approach to it is different, in the sense that Buddhists believe that when you're reborn, you can come back as an animal. Some Buddhists believe that. Tibetan Buddhists are interesting. They're unique in this way because of all Buddhists, because I practiced a lot of different forms of Buddhism. They believe that once you're a human, you're always a human. You move up a chain or a ladder. You know, you may start off as a lower species of living entity, and then you move up to a human, and once you're a human, that's it. You're a human until you become enlightened. But we don't look at it that way. So that's a little different in that approach. But generally speaking, thank you, Prabhu. But generally speaking, thank you. Oh gosh, wow. Nice. So generally speaking, that's the difference between the Buddhist idea of rebirth and the thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So that's the difference between the two. With that, let me make sure I'm answering the question clearly. Yeah, so that's a basic difference. Buddhist philosophy, is quite different in that way, and even their afterlife, of course, is very different in that sense, because there's no God there in their belief system, at least in how they don't focus on that. So that's for that. Okay. You want to add to that? Anybody have any other comments about that? Nope. Okay. Okay, we have time for maybe, depending how long the question is, one more. And then we can discuss as we go along too, if we want to. If you could give the best advice, what would it be? Wow. Boy, that's narrowing down the scope right there. It's a good question. I mean, it really is. That's an interesting question. The best advice. What would it be?
Like that you learned?
Yeah, that I learned from the. Yeah, I think that's what it be. Best advice. I think for me, the best advice for me. God, that's encompassing so many things all at once. That's what things in my head. I can't narrow it down. I've had a lot of good advice on Krishna consciousness. Let's put it that way. A lot of good advice. Yes, Prabhu.
Be the servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord.
Very nice. Very good. Hey, yeah, they're devotees. Why don't you share what the best advice you've had?
I think to find the most advanced devotee or devotees, hear Hari Katha from them, and serve them.
Wonderful. Anybody else want to add to that? Yeah.
Somebody told me once to get as much association as I can.
Good advice. Yeah. What's that?
Did you do one?
I did, Prabhu. It's right here. Yes, thank you.
Give me a plastic bag. 'Cause I'm gonna.
You want me to wrap it up, maybe?
Well, just the bag, I'll wrap it up.
So, I think everything for me is wrapped up in the holy name. For me. And the funny thing is that advice I didn't initially get from a guru per se. I got it from George Harrison. So it's kind of like from the Beatles. That's when I first heard the holy name, really. And I guess, oh, you know what? That's an interesting story, and I think that's probably an interesting way to start. One of my best advice things was that I was in a record store, no longer there. And albums had the Radha Krishna Temple record that was there. And I was asking the guy that worked there, I asked him whether or not, I was looking for something different. What are you looking for? And he was like, different. It was in the Beatles thing. He says, yeah, that's something that George Harrison put out. He says, that might be something really out there and different. He's a hippie, I didn't care. I said, okay. Bought it for $2. Took it home, listened to that album, and I went, it was so cool. So was that good advice? I don't know, maybe. Yeah. Kind of an offshoot way.
What did he say on the album?
What's that?
What did George Harrison say on the album?
I don't remember.
Oh,
I
must
don't.
have had to do with the holy name.
I had to do with the holy name, probably. I don't remember the album cover. I remember the pictures and the deities on the front cover. But I don't remember the back. But yeah, I just listened to that thing. I thought it was great. It's so unusual. It's great. All right. Anybody else want to add to that? Best advice that they had in Krishna consciousness? Yes.
I was inspired earlier on Vivekananda Prabhu.
Yeah.
He said, Krishna is not cheap.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, that's love. Like Krishna experienced real love. He doesn't experience something superficial.
Yeah.
That's how that out to me. It's like,
yeah.
God is the source of love.
Yeah.
That's all he's about.
Right.
He has everything else.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
So he knows when you're being genuine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's great. All right. Well, we have time for one more short question, I think. We're just about that time. And we can discuss because there's some longer questions in here. So I'm going to pick a short one. Some good questions, by the way. Oh, yeah, we're definitely going to take this one. This is really good. I can directly relate to this and give you good stories about that. How to maintain a balance between spiritual life and personal and family life. Boy, that's a challenge. It depends. It depends on whether or not, if I'm assuming that if you are two devotees that are raising a family, then it can be a lot easier, because you're all in the same thing, and you can support each other in that, in Krishna consciousness. If you're a mixed family, however, that's another issue altogether. That can be very challenging. I know that by personal experience, it can be extremely challenging. I do know that how you mix that up is that you have to be realistic about what that means. As two devotees, let's take a hypothetical scenario. You have two devotees, and they fall in love, and they decide to become husband and wife. Okay? As devotees, they should have a full understanding of what that means to be husband and wife, separate from man and woman, because it's a totally different thing. So when that happens and you have a family, you have to realize all that goes with that. And sometimes certain things, like your vows and things like that, you try to keep them as well as possible, but certain things, as husband and wife, you have duties, and so that can be challenging. If you have a mixed relationship, that you're a devotee and your spouse is not, or you have a girlfriend or boyfriend and they're not sympathetic towards your path, and that's a whole nother thing. And that can be challenging. Family as far as parents, relatives, brothers, sisters, things like that. Some people can be really good at explaining to their family members what they're following, and try to do that as best they can. But of course, inevitably, people who don't understand this movement are going to look at it from the old-fashioned saying, "Oh, you're a cult," or something like that. So you have to explain to them that you believe in God. You just want to love God, and that's not. It's just that you're just following a different way of doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. So explaining communication, that's really the key. And whatever relationship you're having with your family, when it comes to this sort of thing, you've got to communicate. A couple's got to communicate. When communication breaks down, everything breaks down. It's just not going to work if you don't communicate. So balancing all of that is that, in a way, it's all the same. If you're two devotees, spiritual life becomes family life, and family life becomes spiritual life. You combine the two in a way that it becomes complementary of each other and becomes a part of each other, in the purest sense of the word. But sometimes you have to work on that. I mean, it's not something that comes easy. Something becomes automatic, and you have to be aware of that. In my particular situation, from my wife, she was not of a devotee, and so for me it was a lot more challenging, and I made a lot of mistakes. You can be overzealot in the sense where you get into a spiritual path and you can go a whole hog, and you want to live in the purest possible way that you possibly can. And if you're in a marriage, for a person that's not a devotee, that is not always practical. So you have to be realistic about what you take on. Family, in another sense of the word, like mothers and fathers and parents. Again, you have to make them understand the best you can of what you're doing. And, help to preach a little bit, but don't be over enthusiastic to do that. Sometimes it depends on how your family is. It depends on the personality of your family. Some people want to hear everything. Some people don't want to hear nothing. If religion comes up, they say 2 topics not to bring up at a dinner is politics and religion. So, but if you have a mixed family and they're not real sympathetic to your path, then you have to kind of judge whether or not it's worth it to even bring it up. just follow what you follow, Balancing that all out is being realistic about your approach and what you're willing to fight and not fight. That's just the practicality of that. But as a couple, that's another thing altogether. If you're committed as a couple, as a husband and wife, then you have to try to work out the best you can. With that. Okay. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I think also not putting too much pressure on yourselves on any one day. Like you might really immerse in Krishna consciousness all day long. And then there's other days where you're canning your room, doing your RT, like you're doing it, but you have to work a lot. I know with other stuff and you don't get the full immersion, but
Right.
You will see the ebbs and flows and just like stay consistent.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Yeah, balancing that out too. Yeah, because some days you're going to be like, got in the zone, man, just all happening. And other days it's like, oh my goodness, I've had those days where I've had that, And at work, if you're at work and you're trying to balance out that work schedule too, I mean, depending on if you have the luxury to, kind of thinking of Krishna while you're working. I was fortunate when I was like doing IT work at Pima, or I was in the lab, just kind of waiting for students to ask me questions. I could be sitting there chanting rounds. I could be chanting mantra, doing mantra meditation. And I would. Sometimes if I'd be in a classroom and I was putting in software and computers, I'd just be going, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, so I'd have that luxury of doing that. And I think one day, one of my coworkers came in and I was singing down my lungs, and they came in and thought, what are you doing? Kind of weird. But, you just do that. So you try to be as you try to balance things best you can with them, with life and so forth. Anybody else? Okay, well, that's the end tonight. We can continue to talk if you want to. I can, what do you want to do? So, anyway, thank you very much for all coming. Very much. Hare Krishna to everyone. And thank you for having me. And no, that's about it. All right. Hare Krishna, everybody. Yeah.
You answered lots of questions.
Yeah.